Welcome everybody to the LinkedIn Ads Lab. Today I'm very excited to have Kayla Mehdeeka, who we go back a little bit longer than Kayla actually realized, because when Perkbox were advertising on LinkedIn, I was actually Kayla's account manager. Now, when I reached out, she didn't remember that, but it was a long time ago and I didn't expect her to. So but I've been kind of in the background following what Kayla has been doing for the last couple of years. Head of product marketing at Willow, and also recently gone fractional with Medica. And I've been a big fan of the newsletter, which gives some really interesting insight into marketing with limited resources, some strong opinions, which I love. And it's always a great read. So I'd recommend, I'll leave the link below for anyone to read it, but I do recommend signing up to that. So welcome.
Thank you. Great intro.
Tell us a little bit more about yourself and what you're doing right now.
Yeah, so I'm Kayla. I'm a growth and product marketer. My background has always been in like startups and tech, and 99% of the time it was just me on my own, either being the first marketer to be hired or being the first of a specific type. So like at Willow, I was the first product marketer and had to set that up and then grew the function. But now as a fractional marketer, that's kind of become my ICP, is companies that have a product, that have a sales team. Often it is the founder doing the sales, but they don't have a marketing team. And so they want someone who can come in, run the shop, have a little bit of everything going on and be self-sufficient. So they have low budgets, they have low resources. Out of all my clients, only one of them has like a part-time junior that helps. So there's, limited resources. That's the theme of my career.
Yeah, it's a good place to be though. And I feel that this is something that is the constant argument. Is it better to join a bigger company and learn how to do systems, or is it better to start small and know how to do everything? I'm very much of the opinion that it's the latter. So knowing how to do as much as you possibly can, understanding what you're good at, and like understanding things on surface level and knowing where to go deep is an incredible skill to have.
If you try a little bit of everything, you find out what you like as well. Yeah. Like there might be a different area of marketing that you really enjoy, but if you don't try it, you just don't know.
So what was the inspiration as we're on the newsletter, what was the inspiration for starting the newsletter? Was it just to get your opinions out there, or what was that?
Yeah. So I started it in 2020, but it's actually not a COVID related theme. Okay. I was super burnt out. Being the only marketer, doing a lot of things, asking for resources and not really getting them. And then I was like, you know what? I don't have a great network because I'm alone all the time, and potentially like asking other people for help would like help me be less burned out, because, if I don't know how to do something, rather than having to teach myself, I could just ask someone. And so I started the newsletter with the initial goal of it being like a networking exercise, so that I could reach out to people and be like, hey, can I interview you for my newsletter? And they'd have a higher chance of saying yes, rather than, those really bad, cold LinkedIn messages. It's like, can I pick your brain? And you're like, no, you can't. So it was like, okay, this will give me a reason to reach out to people and like build relationships and build my network out. And I was like, maybe it'll also get me a job. It never has gotten me a job. Even now, my clients, I think only one of them actually subscribes and like opens every like fourth or fifth issue. But yeah, so it started like that. And then every issue was driven by like what I was doing at work that week. So it was like it was like writing a diary of like, this week I'm working on this. This is what I found really difficult. Here's the research that I did to overcome that. And like, I might as well share my findings.
It's extremely useful, and I like the one today about websites, the breakdown. We'll get into that a little bit later. But tell us a little bit about how you ended up in kind of doing what you're doing. So obviously marketers have many different journeys. So where did it all start, and how does it end up where it is now?
So I'm based in Australia, and in Australia, when you go to high school, which, I don't know what the your schooling system is, but we have like primary school, which is like kindergarten to year 6, and then year 7 to year 12 is high school. So there's like a mandatory, you have to do 100 hours of foreign language. And the school that I went to, like you often don't get to pick. It's just like whatever teacher is at your school and what language they speak. My school did Japanese, and so I found it really fun. And then like when I got to my like more senior levels of high school where you get to pick your subjects, I was like, oh, this seems fun. I'm like getting decent grades in it, so I'll just pick that because it seems easy. Same thing happened when I got to university. I was like, I'll just keep going with Japanese until I figure out what it is that I want to do. And then eventually I was like, you know what? I think I'm just going to be a translator because like I've been doing this, like I've been studying for 10 years. And then I did actually get a job straight out of uni translating for a marketing agency. So I was translating Japanese materials into English, and it was also like an audience change. So they wanted to import Japanese goods and market them to Anglo-Australian, like white Australian audiences. And being like white Australian, I was like, this isn't interesting. People don't know what these words mean. They wanted to keep all the names of things like the original Japanese. I was like, no one knows what this means. No one's going to buy this. And so I ended up doing a lot of coaching into like what I, as the audience, would want to hear about. And that is kind of how I transitioned from the translating into the marketing. And then I was there for a few years. And then after that, I kind of transitioned into startups and tech without really knowing what I was doing. And I've been in it ever since. So it's been about 10 years in tech now. So
let's jump into your business. So what type of businesses do you work with at the minute?
So I work with B2B SaaS companies. I was describing them to someone the other day as they're in boring industries. So my clients at the moment are across like telecom, expense management, logistics, and solar. So Australia's got a really big solar industry. And it's like a CRM and sales platform, like specifically for solar businesses. So very kind of like not flashy, not exciting jobs, but like what I've found is that they're very stable. The culture is usually really good because they're not like psycho industries. And yeah, what they all have in common is that I work directly with the founder or the CEO and not with a marketing team. So they've got like they're good businesses that are making money, but they just haven't spent a lot of time in marketing. And so the foundations need to be set up and kind of like built from there. And it's like build one thing, let it run, add one thing, let them run, add another thing, let it run. And so it's like a slow over time journey for them.
And do you have like an approach or a strategy for these type of businesses that you apply that specifically for kind of founder-led marketing-less businesses?
Yeah. So because I have a product marketing background, they all go through what I've like started calling the Medica method. So there's foundational documentation that happens so that I know what the product does, and that if I wanted to, I could go in their product and know how to use it without them like teaching me. And so I do have like logins to all of their products. I know how to use all their products. Like what I was saying before, marketers should know this. It's not just a product marketing thing. Yeah. But yeah, so there's documentation of the product from a marketing lens and a sales lens. And then that is used like during the journey of making that and learning the product, you inherently have to talk to different departments. So often like for me, it's just the founder or like one or two other staff members. But for bigger companies, like you have to talk to customer success, you have to talk to sales, you have to talk to product. If they have a marketing team, you have to speak to the marketing team members who've been there, who can say this is what we've done in the past. And through doing that, you find all the holes in the business. So, marketing's marketing, but marketing is an enablement service to other teams. So you do need to know those other teams, and you find out like, oh, this team's really struggling with this, and here's how marketing could help. Or even these two teams aren't talking to each other and they're both trying to solve the same problem, but they just haven't like connected the dots there. So through the process of that documentation, I find all these little quirks, and then that is what builds out the strategy for, okay, here's like the biggest holes in the business that marketing could help with. We're going to fill those first because they're the most impactful. Here's like some longer term stuff that we can tick off in the background. And then here's some stuff that's like straight up missing and no one is doing, it hasn't been covered. And we're just going to go through a checklist of those items as well.
The first thing you said straight away got the cogs turning in terms of getting to know the product and like using the product. And even obviously there's the areas of the business is huge as well, but it's such a simple thing that can tell you so much about a business, and it can tell you so much about what direction the marketing strategy needs to go.
Also, like if you're in a marketing team and you are like, people don't respect what we do and people don't invite us in or like ask for our opinion and stuff, which is very common, like don't feel alone in that. One way to like build that bridge is to do the things that you're complaining about. So like they're not showing interest in what we do. Like, okay, you should go show interest in what they're doing. So if you go to your product team or your sales team and you just go, hey, tell me about what it is that you do. Show me your job. What are you building? What are you selling? Like, I'm interested, and you just pay attention and you're an active listener. Like that relationship's going to start to build from there.
100%. And I think one really clever way I've seen companies do that in the past is they have an intern who kind of does that for them. So essentially does a rotational role when they're like in the early stages of their career and does like a couple of months in sales, a couple of months in marketing, a couple of months in product. And then at the end of the year, they're like, here's the report. Here's what you all are doing. Here's what the crossover is. And I know that's done on like a bigger consultancy, but like it can simply be you switching your role, you know, sitting at people's desk, hounding people. But it can also be something like a bigger business that has the budget. If they have budget for an intern, make that their goal, you know?
Yeah. Also, like never think that you're above doing it. Like if you're a senior marketer and you're like, I've been at this company for 5 years and I don't know what we do, like just kind of suck it up and be like, you know what, I'm going to go learn. I'm going to have an open mind.
For sure. That's a very good point. I think like another thing that I know people hate doing, but I kind of like doing it, but listening to sales calls, you know,
I like it too.
Even if the sales team don't give you time, just tell them to press the record button, you know. And I know there is sometimes that friction of between the salesperson and a marketer of why are you listening? Well, like whatever. So a lot of the time it's fine, you know, and there's absolutely no problem. But I know there sometimes is friction. One way I've found around that is just get them to record and then send them after. You know, you're not taking anyone's time.
Yeah. I've also found like when salespeople are like, I don't want you to hear what I say. You're just like, we're in the same office. Like, I hear you. You're loud. I don't need a recording to know what you're saying. I want to know what the person you're talking to is saying. And like, don't worry. I hear your voice enough that when I'm listening to a recording, I drown you out. Like my brain turns off and then I zone back in when it's a customer. So there's ways to like, I don't know, make them more comfortable with giving you the recordings as well.
Yeah, but it's essential. It's such a
it's
a huge problem usually in position, and I find with new clients or prospects, you know, people you're speaking to, the first thing obviously a lot of people say is this isn't working, our messaging isn't working, we're not getting the results. More often than not, it's a positioning issue, and I like more often than not it's because they don't have the customer knowledge, you know, and they haven't sat down and really got into the nitty gritty of the product first of all, then the customer and whatever else. And I feel like it's something that can not necessarily be simply solved, but there's absolute gold already sitting in businesses that they're not really is not really being made use of. So back to your strategy, the Medica method. How does once you've done all the foundational work, how does that trickle down then to, say, your paid social strategy or your paid search strategy or any of your channels?
When we look at paid, because we have such small budgets to work with, like everything has to be really impactful. And so the idea of like, let's throw out like 4 variations and see what the winning one is, like that's not going to happen. I'll be really lucky if I can convince them to do an A/B test of messaging, because, you know, once you've got a small budget, cutting it in half to test 2 variations means that neither of them reach statistical significance. And so you've got to be really confident in like the positioning and messaging that you're putting into the ads. So the documentation, because it's all clearly laid out, we can be like, you know what, for this, we want to test value propositions. And so they're already written down. You can pull them out and test them. You don't have to like go through the creative, like, oh, what's the creative that we're going to do for this and stuff? It's already there. Or you could be like, we're going to test features. We're going to test testimonials. If we have a library of them, we'll just pull a couple out and test those. And so it just means that you're not starting from scratch every time that you want to make a campaign, whether it's paid or organic. It's just like this repository of stuff that's like copy and pastable. So that's how the documentation comes into it. But yeah, a lot of it, the clients that I'm working with, they are super happy to run experiments. Like I'm really glad I've got really open-minded clients. But it is small budgets. So I think like 5,000 Australian dollars a month is probably the most that's been put on anything that I've been managing since I've been fractional. When I was at Perkbox, we were doing like $20,000 to $40,000 a month, which is quite big.
How do you deal with the, what would I describe it as, the impending dread that sometimes executives feel when they're handing over budget for marketing? How do you deal with those? Like even small budgets, you know, sometimes the dread is bigger if it's a new budget or a smaller budget.
I have to say that the dread was a lot bigger when I was a full-time employee. Now as a fractional, it's kind of like, you know, I explained to them, we can do this, it's test. I can't guarantee anything. But what we can do is at the end, or even like while it's going on, we learn from it. So what lessons can we take away from it that we can implement in sales calls, in organic campaigns, in the rest of the marketing and stuff like that? And so I think it's the approach of learning that is really important, because as long as you've learned one lesson, you can kind of be like, it was worth it. If you've learned absolutely nothing and you've gotten no leads from it and you've just thrown $5,000 down the drain, then I'd feel dread.
Yeah, and it's a really good way of framing it. And it does make me wonder sometimes when I speak to new people or just on LinkedIn, I'll see things like very popular people on LinkedIn saying that I've seen this company waste 300,000 on a paid ad campaign here or this here. And I'm kind of like, how did they manage to waste every single dollar of that budget? Or is that the truth?
So one of my clients, bless them, had an agency before me and they spent $250,000 and I think they got like 3 or 4 leads, and that was over like a year. And it was because the agency just kept being like, trust us, like this is the right thing to do. And because they didn't have a marketing team or a marketer in-house, like they just felt like, okay, well, we'll trust you, but like we've got to get something out of this. And even I was like, you are very patient. Like I would have cut them off after like 20K.
It's a hard one to deal with and to kind of advise people on, because obviously with marketing there is an element of trust the process, you know, and with advertising, especially B2B, if you're dealing with, I don't know, some kind of system that has a 2-year sales cycle for people to adopt, you know, that there is going to be a while before they see any type of return. There is going to be like an element of they have to trust the marketers and trust the agency and whatever, but there has to be some
early indicators.
Exactly. I was going to say,
Yeah. I think also it's like, if you're going to spend a lot of money and you're going to, like you've got a lot riding on it and you want a lot of results, test it in free channels or channels that you already own first and see what the response is. So like your emails, your prospects, your customers, like throw that into like your monthly newsletter or whatever and see if people respond to the messaging, or get people to test it on sales calls and see if that gets a good response before you throw money behind it. Like there's so much that you already have. And I think that's like what marketers that don't have a lot of resources are really good at doing, is like surveying your landscape and being like, what do I have to work with? And the answer is always a lot more than what you realize. Like you've got so many customer facing team members if you've got customer success and sales, and then, you know, your product team will be able to give you insight into the research that they've done, hopefully in developing the product, and like using all that. It's just time. Like if you don't have money, you're using time, but you're using that time to speak to people who have the answer that you're looking for. And it might just take a bit of puzzling the pieces together to get that bigger picture.
Yeah. If you don't have money, you're using time. I love that. To save people time in the long run, you did
spend money.
you did a really good edition about how not to be a shit agency. So
yes,
it was really relevant for me at the time. I think it was about this time last year when I was setting up, these were things that were like hot on my mind, you know, things that I was trying to think about and habits I was starting to get into that I was like, I need to kill that before it becomes something that's detrimental. So being kind of on the other side of the coin, now that you're more so in a fractional role, you have a lot of elements of being an agency. So what are some of the things that you would recommend, I suppose, but also what are some of the things you would look out for in how to spot maybe a below par? We won't say shit, we'll say below par agency.
Substandard. So I think the biggest thing I've learned as like now being a supplier is that communication counts for more than anything else that you do. So if this happens pretty regularly where I've submitted something, it's a draft, it needs a review, it needs approval, and I can't, like, there's nothing left for me to do on that piece of work until I get feedback. Just being really upfront and being like, you're a blocker. Like the work is with you. I'm now in this position. I have the time. I'm ready to do the work as soon as you give me the feedback. And then that way they know that you're not just sitting around doing nothing. And like, it's their responsibility to get back to you. That communication is really important, because otherwise, if you don't chase up and you don't say like, hey, I'm still waiting for this. Hey, it's been a few days. When do you think you're going to get this to me? Then at the end of the month, when you send your invoice, they're going to be like, you did nothing this month. Like, what am I paying you for? So I think that communication and the regular check-ins, like, here's what I'm working on. Here's the status of all the things that I'm working on. And here's what's next in the pipeline, because they also want to know that you're not going to finish and then like sit around and wait for them to call you to start the next piece of work. So that is really important. On the other side though, like I used to hire agencies like when I was in-house, and one of the things that I kind of used to dread was the whip calls. But now I run whip calls and I'm like, I don't need you to share a report every whip on where things are at. Like, I don't want to read a report. I don't want to see a spreadsheet. I don't want to have to like look at the columns and rows that like aren't on the screen anymore because this spreadsheet is so big. Like, give me the top hits in dot points in an email, and then we will talk person to person in a whip. And if we finish in 15 minutes, amazing. Let's both go back to work. But there's a lot of agencies who feel like it seems like they put so much effort into, we build a report, we do all this analysis for you. And it's like, I don't actually have the time to read it, nor do I want to. I just want to know, is it working? Yeah. And so if you can communicate that quickly and clearly, and we both go back to work, everybody's happy.
Yeah, I think I kind of a weird perspective that you don't really get much, where I was kind of neither for a long while. I was like looking at client directs and agencies through obviously the lens of LinkedIn ads. And that was a huge part that I just couldn't get my head around at the time. There was a lot of reports being shared, and sometimes I was being
no one reads them.
I was being asked for some things about the LinkedIn ads campaigns or certain slides or whatever, and I just, every time I was just like, there's no need. This is not telling the story that the client needs to know, and they've no need to see this. It doesn't actually mean anything. Like, there's a lot of data points floating around that are quite popular, I think, to be shared with clients, but they mean nothing. They're just pointless.
There's a lot of like, I need to look like I'm doing a lot. Yeah. I need to look like the money you're paying me is worth it. But if you put that energy into doing the job and you're just giving regular updates. Like sometimes I'll just shoot off an email that's like out of whip cadence. It's like, hey, here's where I'm up to with this. Should have it done by end of week or something like that. And it's just these little check-ins that I don't even respect a reply. If I get a thanks, that's great. But I've done what I need to do. You're aware that I'm working. You're satisfied with that.
Yeah.
I think also like as a fractional, I probably have a lot more like informal check-ins with my clients than what an agency would. Whereas an agency would be like, we will speak to you on this day at this time. Outside of that, email us. We might take 3 days to get back to you. Whereas like, if I have a question, I'll just call my client and be like, hey, what do you think about this? Okay, great, bye. And like, they know like, oh, Kayla's working on our account right now.
Yeah, I think I really admire the big agencies that have managed to maintain their level, you know, because I feel like as a small agency, kind of very similar to yourself in some ways, I do that ad hoc bits and pieces, like, you know, and I'm thinking about the clients all the time. Whereas as agencies get bigger, obviously it lands on someone's desk. Let's just say that's like a harsh way of saying it, but it is true. So I really admire the agencies that are able to keep the standard and the processes in a way, and it obviously due to the hiring as well, you know, but I really admire the agencies that are able to nail that. And I think it's a big risk for an agency as they get bigger. And I see it as a huge challenge for an agency to maintain that level, you know?
Yeah. You know, actually, so my husband also runs a web development agency. He's been doing it for like almost 20 years, but he did like a rebranding exercise with this is like agencies on agencies. He engaged like a customer insights agency to interview their customers and be like, what are our strengths and weaknesses? And then this like other agency was like, we've never heard responses the way that we heard from your customers. Is that almost all of them said they feel like they are your only customer because of how much attention and like the level of service that they get. And I think that's a really nice thing to aspire to. Like, you make your customers feel special and feel like they're your only customer. Like, that's an amazing thing to do.
It's the dream, really, you know, like from a client service perspective. Like, you plug to your husband's agency, you can shout out the name. But that is the dream, right? And it's so easy to get lost in other clients. But ideally what someone comes to you with is, or in their head, it's, we have these problems. We want you to think about us as deeply as you can and fix them for us, you know? And it is harder to do that when there is more mind space being taken up by other customers. So the fact that they've been able to get that type of feedback is credit where credit's due.
Yeah, there's nothing worse than an agency putting work forward and you look at it and you're like, this is not what we do.
Yeah. Missing the mark completely. It happens a lot.
It does.
So we worked briefly together when you were at Perkbox, and it was before Medica started. Is that right in saying that?
Yes.
Right in saying that?
Yeah, it would be.
You included Perkbox in one of the newsletters, and it was about basically their switch. So when I worked with them, they had a huge emphasis on paid. So when I worked with them in the UK, with the UK team, there's a huge emphasis on paid. And then obviously they moved over, new market in Australia. You had a completely new challenge. And there was maybe a switch in mindset. Can you tell us a little bit about that specifically?
So in the UK, I can't remember when they started, 2016, 2017. Basically, Facebook ads were like dirt cheap and really effective. And so they built the Perkbox brand mostly through Facebook ads. And then when Facebook started to get too expensive, they started looking at other channels. So LinkedIn was one of them. I think they were doing a lot of like ebook downloads and native forms from memory. And then they also went into Google PPC. So they kind of had this luxury of a good brand that, like, I'm not from the UK, so this is what I was told, but I was told that like Perkbox was in the HR world like a household name. So like if you said it to someone, they would say like, I've heard of it. And in Australia, we didn't have that. So I was the first Australian hire. They had some team members from the UK come to set up the foundations of the company. And then I was the first hire. So I was an Australian local marketer. And we initially were like, we'll just replicate the accounts and the ads and the campaigns and run them in Australia. And then they all did terribly because it's a different market, different messaging, localization. So we ended up using like design assets and stuff from the UK team, but all the messaging and stuff was localized to Australia. So we didn't have a brand name, which meant that we needed stronger messaging. Like we couldn't rely on recognizability. And we actually invested a lot into PR to build that up. And then we did start with Facebook ads. We kind of like followed the playbook of the UK. We started with Facebook ads. They got really expensive really quickly. And then we tried LinkedIn and Google. Google didn't work so well for us because like after digging into it, the UK, most of the Google was brand. So people were Googling Perkbox. Yeah. Like, of course, that's going to work when people know your brand, but no one knows it here. And then, so yeah, we did a lot of tests on LinkedIn, but it was all very experimental. We found I've spoken to other companies like outside of Perkbox that are based in other countries. And I keep hearing so many people being like, oh, native forms work so well. But I've tried them across multiple clients and like industries, target audiences, and they just don't seem to work as well in Australia. I don't know what it is about Australians culturally. I think we're less likely to put an email address into things than what like an American is, for example. But
it's a really interesting point. So the first point on it not working across regions is like, it's something that I see all the time. Is just like, yes, this has worked here. Let's scale this directly, content, copy, ads to this region, and it's going to work.
Copy paste.
Yeah, let's do projections on how we're going to show the board, how we're going to crack this region, whatever. It doesn't a lot of the time. Like localization is huge, but also channels in each market completely differ. On the native forms piece, I'm really conflicted about native forms, and for me it's always a test. So I'm definitely not in the camp of they're great, use them. That's not a piece of advice I'd give to a client. From my point of view, they work for some people. I think when they work really well is when, yes, there's a propensity for people to complete them. Secondly, when companies have a really good system in place to be able to nurture them, because when people do, even in markets where people do complete forms, sometimes they're so easy to do. Sometimes they forget they've done them. So there has to be like there has to be like an instant, like touch or something, or some kind of nurture stream that is going to make them feel a little bit like they're in a system. Because if it's just a set and forget, and then you get a lot of leads and contact them a month later, doesn't work. So I kind of usually find that it's a bit of a balance. I think the landing page conversions always have better intent. It's just a fact, but they're so much more expensive. So it's just the in between of the both. So I agree in some instances they work, but I'm definitely not in the camp that they're a home run for sure.
Yeah. Everything's an experiment. Anything that works for another company like doesn't mean that it's going to work for you, but also what works for you doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work for someone else.
So we're back. Quick costume change. So as most people can realize, there was a small few technical difficulties. So let's get back into it. So we were speaking about landing pages and what makes a great landing page. Obviously, you've done a newsletter on it, which I read, but I'd love to get your opinion on what you think makes a good landing page and what you think makes a good landing page for paid ads specifically.
So when it comes to landing pages, I just think it would, in general, like following the best practice of having a landing page that matches what your ad said is worth the investment of time. So if you've got all of your ads pointing to a single landing page, it's not going to convert as highly as if you have landing pages that match the messaging or that match the imagery that you're testing in your ads. So personally, I'm a like right click, open a new tab kind of person, and then I'll leave all my tabs until like I have time to address them. And sometimes I'll go back to a tab and be like, why is this open? I don't remember what this is. And then, you might like check your history or click back if you haven't opened it in a new tab, and you'll see the ad that you came from and you just think like, oh, I'm still interested in that. I still want that thing in the ad, but that's not really what this landing page is about. So yeah, I was actually speaking to a founder yesterday, and I said like a really small, we were talking about one of their competitors, and I said like they could really do a bit better on their like EDM design. And he sort of defended them, and like, to his credit, like he's a founder. He was like, oh, sometimes these things, like you just don't have the time, or you don't have the headspace, or you've got 1,000 other priorities, and something like that slips and you think it'll be fine. But my reply was, yeah, but that investment of 5 minutes of changing the headline on the landing page, or changing the order that you mentioned things so that the thing that's in the ad is first on the landing page, that investment is going towards a higher conversion rate, that's going towards sales. Like if you're not making time for that and you're not happy with your conversion rate or your sales, then you already have your answer. So yeah, my hot take, spend the time.
Yeah, and I feel like it's often not until you get the feedback from someone specifically, or recently I've downloaded Microsoft Clarity, so I can basically, it's kind of like Hotjar, so you can see it records what people do on your website, and where people go, where they spend their time, heat mapping, all that. And it wasn't until I was like, obviously, so my personal landing page, most of my business comes through LinkedIn. So my personal landing page is just there. If anyone is going to find me, or anyone wants to redirect back and learn a bit more about me, that is the aim of it. That's what it's meant to do. Bigger website obviously is to come, and the more strategic website is to come later. But when I looked at the screen recordings and I was seeing what people were doing and where they were spending time and when they were bouncing, I was just like, it was like the anxiety I was getting of like, why have I let this up? It's not good enough, and I need to be spending more time on it. So it's very interesting that you say that like it was, yeah, that obviously someone defended it and talked about time and things like that, but it often doesn't become a priority until you actually like clearly see the opportunity that's being missed. Either, I know it's one screen recording, it's not necessarily a huge data set, but it's enough to make it a priority.
Yeah. I get, like, when it comes to paid ads specifically, if you're spending thousands, how can you justify that cost if you're not like spending a couple of minutes per, like duplicating a landing page and just changing the headline? Make the headline match the headline that's in the ad. Like it's
true. And oftentimes with paid ads and with LinkedIn ads, they're so expensive that it's the small, you need to have a decent conversion rate, but oftentimes you can have exhausted all the options with LinkedIn ads, and sometimes the big wins are going to come from your landing pages, and the small percent increases, and that's where you're going to get your value for money at the end of the day. So yeah, like completely agree with that. It's a huge, it's a lot bigger than some people give it credit for.
Yeah.
So okay, so you mentioned a founder there, who you're obviously dealing with a lot of founders, and in the being fractional, you oftentimes you're in the business, but you're oftentimes kind of deemed as maybe outside the business, not by no reflection of how you work or anything, just as being fractional by nature. Oftentimes stakeholders, when they're not used to having a full marketing department or dealing with an agency or freelancer, they like to just to get things out. You know, that, or the phrase, we just want to get it out. How do you deal for everyone on the call, for the fractional marketers on the call, and for the internal marketers on the call? How do you deal with a founder or a stakeholder who wants to just get something out prematurely when it really needs a little bit more time, space, and maybe thought before it goes anywhere?
So there's like two parts to this question. The first part is the internal versus fractional. So I have only been fractional for about a year. Before that, I've been an in-house marketer for almost a decade. And my emotional response is very different across those two types of employment. So when I was in-house, I would feel very strongly about, no, we can't just get this out. We have to do things properly. This is a reflection of me. This is a reflection of my work. The results are attributed to me. I don't want to put something out if I don't think it's good. And I have a perfect story for this, which is I had not a founder, but a senior leader who was my boss, who did not have a background in marketing, thought that they were a great marketer. And we had a whiteboard where we kept score of who won A/B tests. And it started out as like a friendly thing. And then eventually it got to the point where like I had all these points and they didn't. And they still were challenging my thoughts and opinions on like what we should be doing or like what will work and what won't work. And mind you, at this point also in this company, I had set the best ever performing like copy on an ad, the best campaign like in the history of the company's performance. Like I had made that, and you
got the hero. You cracked it.
Yeah, and they were still like, "Are you sure? I don't know if our audience is really going to like that." And I was like, "I think I know them pretty well at this point." And like even after like doing this friendly competition to try and like build some trust and be like, look at the data that I know better than you do. And they would still challenge me. And that was a really tough environment to work in. But then now as a fractional, my emotional response is very different. It's like, okay, you're paying me. This is a transaction. This is your request. So it reflects on you. It doesn't reflect on me. If I complete the brief and you are happy with the outcome, that is the reflection on me, is doing what I've been asked to do. Whereas whether or not you implement it well or you do implement it well and then it doesn't work, that's your strategy. That's not my strategy. So yes, some clients I am much more embedded in the team than others, and I'm treated like an employee. It's very nice when it happens, but it's not part of the agreement. And so that like step back is something that I was not able to do when I was a full-time employee. And it was something that I used to struggle with a lot, because I would, for anyone who's ever been burnt out, like you would say to yourself, like, I'm not saving lives, like my job doesn't really matter that much, like it's not that important in the scheme of things, but like why does it have such a strong hold over me? And going fractional, like from day one, I just had a different mindset about it, because there was like a contract and there was, terms of agreements and stuff like that. So that's part one. And then part two is how to push back. So this goes for whether you're fractional or in-house. Some leaders don't take well to being questioned, but if you can figure out like what it is that's motivating them, you can push in that direction. So for example, with my leader who wanted a scoreboard to track whether or not I actually was better than them, prioritization, they were really big on prioritization. And so it would be like, okay, where does this campaign fall in the priority level? If it's really high, then maybe we should be spending a bit more time on it. If it's low, then yeah, let's get it out. Or if someone that you're reporting to like cares about timing or quality or brand or, whatever it is, like link it back to that and say, like, where does this piece of work fall in that category of thing that you care about? And if it is really high, let's treat it appropriately. If it's really low, sure, let's get it out.
Yeah, I think it sometimes comes from, obviously, in some cases, speed is more important, but I feel like in a lot of times there's other different departments in business and whatever else where timelines need to be set and abided to for the operation of the business.
Yeah.
However, when it comes to marketing campaigns, oftentimes the quality of a campaign matters so much more than the week or two or whatever worth of like speed you would have got to get it out before. The extra bit of work can make a huge difference to the quality of the campaign. So I think that's a really good way to to approach it as well, and to think about it. What you were saying initially about how you deal with it as from a fractional point of view, I admire your ability to do that, because I haven't got to that level of it just yet, where I feel I'm delivering on the brief solely, and just if I do my job there, I'm good enough there. Because sometimes I'm kind of like, well, I have to I have to push back on this, and maybe to your point, it's not the right thing to do. It's not what I've been contracted to do, and I shouldn't be doing it. So I admire your boundaries on that. There, it's definitely a better way to think about it, and a healthier way to think about it, I think. So just while we're speaking about dealing with stakeholders, and in my mind, and from speaking to you, we've been speaking about smaller businesses and marketing with limited resources. So LinkedIn obviously being part of the topic of this podcast, or the kind of the main part of the main topic for this podcast, sometimes haven't got it right, or I think maybe in general haven't got it right yet in terms of the tools they provide for smaller businesses or marketers who have less budget and limited resources. So if the LinkedIn product team or CMO or whoever has a big SMB point on his priority list, and he's thinking about how can we increase our market share and make LinkedIn more accessible for smaller businesses and marketers with limited resources, are there any things that you would put your hand up and ask for or campaign for if you're in that room?
LinkedIn, call me. We can have a good chat. My biggest thing that I want is just better reporting. So from the company, like small business perspective, or like small budget perspective, even if you're in a larger company, the reporting on the campaigns is so poor in comparison to what other platforms give you. So like the clicks and the other category, like why is there an other category? That you are LinkedIn, you are Microsoft, you should know what every click is attributed to. And the fact that there's an other category, like depending on what the purpose of the campaign is, that could be really critical in me as a marketer evaluating the campaign and saying, yes, this did what I want it to, or, you know what, I have no idea what this did and I've just wasted money on this. So, if your target is to get people to click through a carousel, like, is that carousel click in the other category? Like probably, because there's no carousel click option. But then what else is in there? Is it click to see comments, click to like someone else's comment? Like there's so many other things in there that's a waste that I don't care about, but I would like to know what they are so I can know not to care about them. But they just don't give you that granularity.
Yeah, it's really important. And I think it's especially so even when companies with budget come to talk about the results and whatever, sometimes there can be a little bit of smoke and mirrors around what actually the results are. So like, they're spending money on a much bigger scale. And you're so right, when it gets down to the smaller budgets and where every result matters and every dollar matters, it just cannot exist like that, because there's so much ambiguity around the other click part of the campaign, and it's also quite a large portion of the click sometimes, so it's just not really acceptable for it to be like that. And I also have seen a couple of things where it would depending on the different objectives that you can, for example, if you use brand awareness objective, it will just measure clicks and it will take in every click that's in relation to the ad whatsoever and record it as a click. However, if you choose website visits, clicks are only people who visited the website. So people, especially when thought leader ads came out first, people were like, I'm getting a 7% CTR. This is unbelievable. This is incredible. However, if you were going for website visits or whatever, it was not transferable. And it was a little bit of a trick from LinkedIn where people like who use LinkedIn all the time had to be, these are not real clicks. Before you pour all your budget into it, be careful.
Yeah. That's the other thing is the way that the campaigns, like the campaign, the ad set, and then that structure sucks. Like once you've made like, let's say you've set a lifetime budget. Now you can't ever go back and like reactivate a campaign or say like, this is phase 2 of the same campaign. And then you got like 1,000 campaigns in your campaign manager to go through. And it's just like, there's a very easy structure here to follow if you just allowed me to like edit things better. Like setting the campaign objective at the campaign level. It's like, okay, but within one campaign, what if I want a different objective for each part of the funnel? Like, what if I want to retarget someone and I want that retargeting campaign to have a different, well, it's not even campaign. It's like, I want that ad to have a different complementary objective to that ad, but I can't have them in the same campaign. Like, that's just not how actual marketing works.
That was meant to come in years ago, to things like that, and they just haven't. So I don't like. I always have thought about, I'd love to be a fly on the wall for the conversations when initially they're like, yeah, that makes sense, let's do that. And then someone is like, no, we're going to pull that feature. How dare you go forward with that? Like, wait, what? Who stops that happening? But anyway.
Yeah. So I remember when we first recorded this, we talked about the long vertical ad format, and like I said, I wanted to try it, and you told me that it doesn't exist anymore and it's been removed. It never even made it to Australia, but now there's the new, you can do a thought leadership ad on any post. It doesn't have to be an employee. I don't know if that's like, you've already had that for ages and it's like coming to Australia, or even if all the stuff I've been seeing is like American and it's not coming to Australia. But like, there's so little information on that. Like, how could you do such a large product release and like not clarify what it is?
It's been released in dribs and drabs, and like, so for people who post about LinkedIn ads, for say, for example, I post about LinkedIn ads, I generally tend to take a week or two after everyone announces it and they're like, right, this is new, it's ready to go, because often they don't really know what direction it's going to go themselves, and they'll change a thing or take something away. But I have heard it is going to be released, and you're so right, because that is going to be absolutely huge, because it's just going to explode influencer marketing for B2B across the platform. There's going to be so many different people using it in clever ways that it's going to be a huge shift, I think. Like, thought leader ads was a big shift, but adding such a small layer of functionality to it opens up completely. What, do you have any thoughts on how you do it, use it, or
like, okay, if I make a post and it's like, oh, I had a good experience with this company, blah, 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 like, you know, whatever. And then they see it and they're like, we want to put that on it as a thought leadership ad. Do I consent? Like, do I get do they call me? Okay, that's good. Because like, I don't know. I was like, imagine you just wake up one day and your like post has exploded and you're like, where have these hundreds of thousands of people come from?
You're like the face of a really undesirable brand.
Yeah, like, I don't know. Or it's even like, I feel like when you leave a official review, like you leave a Google review, you leave a G2 review, whatever, like there's a consent level in there where you've left it on an official channel. But like, let's say you just, I don't know, made an off the cuff LinkedIn, not even endorsement, but just like, oh, this is cool, I'm excited to try this out. Like, is that an endorsement? I don't know.
So on this point, this is one of my worries about thought leader ads, is that right now I can go to LinkedIn and I've curated the feed in a way, following people like yourself and other people who, if they comment about something or if they endorse something, I genuinely will go and research that product and feel like that is a genuine endorsement. Yeah, exactly. And that's one of the things I like about the platform right now. Whereas I feel this edition, look, it will be great for bringing people, for individuals being able to earn money from B2B branding and everything like that. And I'm sure there is going to be some genuine reviews that will be promoted. That's the hope. However, when you put the little bit of extra money behind it, people can change what they say about a brand to artificially make it seem like it's better than it is. So that is my one worry about it.
I also wonder if you could troll a company and like leave a glowing review, get them to sponsor it, and then like edit your post to be like, this company sucks.
That you can do that. That is a hack, because I know you can edit the thought leader ads as they are to get around links and stuff like that. So you can definitely do that. That is a layered troll right there.
People do it on Reddit all the time.
Do they?
Yeah, there's this thing about like, it happens rarely, but when you catch it, it's quite funny. Like someone will get the top comment and then they'll edit it to say something that's like really controversial. And they'll be like, look at all these people upvoting this sentiment. And it's like, just, yeah.
Oh, what a place Reddit is. Okay, so speaking of Reddit, which is actually not so much of like a couple of years ago, it would have been considered a weird B2B tactic, but because Reddit is much more popular now and whatever.
I screenshotted an ad from Reddit the other day, and this is the perfect time to talk about it.
Go for it.
I am a long time Redditor. Please do not look at my account. I got an ad on Reddit, which like the ads on Reddit are always kind of crap. They're always like, hey, Reddit, like, I don't know, not very snappy. But
there's an opportunity there.
But Redditors hate ads. Like there's just, having been on the platform for so long, it's ingrained in the culture of the people who've been there for a long time to be very anti-ad and very like, do not promote anything in a subreddit, do not promote anything in comments. Like if you come across as being a plant or like astroturfing a sub, like they will sniff you out and they will absolutely destroy you. Like they are so strongly and vocal about how anti-ad they are. So anyway, the ads on Reddit are trying to be like, oh, we know you hate ads, but here's an ad. And I don't think it works. But I got an ad. So I got an ad. I still get it. I don't know why they think that I'm the target audience for this. So the Australian Defence Force is posting like career thing. Like, hang on, let me actually get the ad, because I'm pretty sure the headline was like SUP. And I was like, the Australian government has written SUP.
We're cool too.
I was like, this is so bad. I have to screenshot it.
Yeah, if you can get the ad or link it, I'll put this. I'll put it up.
Oh, I've definitely got it. Where have I put it? Oh yeah, I have it. Okay, so I'll send you the image so you can put it in. Okay, so it says, you like user ADF careers promoted. What is up? With question mark. It's even worse than SUP. Like, what is up, children? Yeah. And then it's a video ad of like a woman in corporate clothing, like through a train station on her commute, and then it like swaps to her being in uniform.
Yeah.
What is up with that?
Hopefully
Jerry Seinfeld. Like
that's someone experimenting. You know, that's someone. Let's try Reddit.
Though, like, hang on, this screenshot is dated to the 16th of February. It's the 20th of March and I still get this ad, and I had been getting it for a while before I screenshotted it. So like same video, the same copy. What is up? Come join the army.
Someone is responding. You know, what is up? Maybe I do want to join the army today.
That is the thing, actually. Whenever I see an ad and I think, oh, this is a crap ad, I always have to remind myself, like, if it was crap, they wouldn't be putting it out, and someone's backing, like, someone's engaging with this.
Yeah. Or if you see, I have the same thought when I see an ad that I've seen over and over again, got sick of it, and then I see 3 months down the line, it's back again. I'm like, that must have been the one. That's the one that they're holding on to.
I also love the ad libraries, like LinkedIn has the ad library. Yeah. And if you scroll really far down, you look at the ads that have been running for like 6 months and you're like, that ad works.
Yeah.
That's still there because it's working and it's good. So
yeah. Or alternatively,
that's my hot tip.
I used to do, well, I still do it. I'll probably do it again this quarter, but I used to do a quarterly breakdown of just ads that I thought were good and explain why. There was usually 20, 21 of them. And someone made a really good point. So I was doing it obviously not knowing any of the data behind it. so like I was doing it knowing that some probably were not going to be good. And then someone commented and they were like, this ad actually didn't work for us on one of them. I can't remember whose
why
ad
is
it
it
was
out there?
specifically. And I was like, I liked it. And he was like, yeah, well, it's a nice ad, but it didn't work. And I was just such, it's so true in that, like, something that looks good, ticks all the boxes, like people spend a lot of time on, may not work. And I had this with copywriters. I was speaking to a copywriter recently who's copywritten for a lot of really big brands, and he was just said, as a writer, it's so frustrating being an ad copywriter, because what you think is going to work and what you spend a load of time like crafting to be really compelling doesn't. And sometimes it's the most simple thing, the first thought that came to your head or whatever is the thing that works. Which was interesting to hear from him. But it's if you see an ad over and over again, it's working.
Yeah, I also reached out to a marketer recently, and I sent them a screenshot of an ad for the company that they work for, and I was like, I'm really keen to know, does this ad work? Because in my head, I was like, this is. So the ad was for a financial company, like a financial fintech company, and the ad in big letters said, "This is an ad for CFOs." Like that was in the image. And I screenshotted it and I sent it to them, and I was like, please tell me, like, does this work? Because this is a bold strategy. And I would assume, like, I would not think to do this.
Yeah.
And I had looked through all the other ads that they're running as well, right? And they said it's one of the best converting. And so I was just like, oh, that's really good to know. Thank you. I might try this now.
Another weird one is so everywhere, in nearly every industry, the horizontal creative, the traditional LinkedIn ad creative is dead. Doesn't perform well, low CTRs, and it's seen as kind of generally outdated. However, in the manufacturing industry, with a couple of clients that I've worked in the past, it's still the only one that works. And it needs to be text heavy. So it needs to have detail in it, and it needs to be horizontal for people to convert or people to engage and click through to the website.
Wow.
Yeah. Strange. So my main lesson from that and from this conversation is, don't discard things without the data.
And just ask. Like, people are
that's a really good
more generous
idea,
than
though.
you think.
Yeah, I like that, and I probably will use that just to ask, find out whose ad it is, and ask if it works or not, because
before you endorse
really
it.
Yeah. Before I endorse it or hate on it. So in terms of, we went in a little bit of weird advertising going into Reddit, but along those lines, is there anything that you've done in the past that's a weird tactic that's worked really well for you?
So I used to work for a company called Perkbox. I actually just announced that they've been acquired. Didn't have stock in it, so boohoo for me. We sold employee experience software, and basically what that meant was like a bunch of different ways to make your employees feel appreciated. It was not meant to be like a replacement for a pay rise or a bonus, but like additional to that. And so we did have a perks product that had like small discounts, but like if you actually used them strategically, you could get like pretty good discounts. And they stacked on top of other discounts as well. So you had to kind of play the game a bit, but if you did, it was a good product. And we had a few that we would use in emails a lot for like email nurtures. And if a prospect had gone cold, we would pull out these perks and try to like capture them back with that. But it was through really clever copy. And one of them was, if they hadn't responded to sales emails, this is like one of the last emails in the nurture where it was like, oh, have you been on annual leave? Like, love that for you. That's great. I wish you had told me though, because I could have gotten you flight discounts. Like I could have given you that perk if only I'd known that you were on holiday. And we like, when I wrote it, we all kind of laughed at it. We were like, no one will ever reply to this. And then people were replying to it being like, no, I'm here. Like, I'm not on holiday. And it wasn't even just that they wanted the perk, but it was like they wanted to correct you. They wanted you to know that you were wrong and that they're not on leave. They're ignoring you. But then that would like open the floodgates again, and the salespeople would be like, my God, like people just keep falling for this. And the other one we did was we would send this around like 2 or 3 p.m. In the afternoon. And it would be around like, you know, every Perkbox user gets free coffee once a month or once a week, depending on what your plan is. And like, don't you want a coffee right now? Like, isn't it a great, like, wouldn't you love to just round up your team right now and be like, hey, let's go to the cafe, have a little break, get a free coffee, get back to work. And so we would use the time of the day, seasonal stuff. So we would swap out the seasonal perks. So summer would get like outdoorsy stuff. Winter would get like warm and cozy things. Easter would get Easter stuff. And like if there was any other cultural holidays, like we would center the emails around that. Like you could have gotten this if only you'd talked to us. That worked really well. It was like dribs and drabs. Like sometimes we would get really good responses to it. And we did often get people saying that they enjoyed the emails. So I think that was, people enjoyed that it was fun.
It's positive brand sentiment though, isn't it? You know, and like it's rarely a bad thing. And I think it's definitely a tactic that can be applied on LinkedIn and in B2B marketing more. I feel like a lot of the time the big campaign is crafted, deadlined, put together and then run, when really there's very small nuances in creative and timing, whatever else that can be added just as in the content calendar to make use of those triggers. And especially when it comes to like, okay, so we're talking about time of day and whatever for things during the day, like, you know, the triggers during the day, post work slump, all of that type of thing. But it also happens when you're selling a tech product, you know what I mean? Whether it's coming to the end of quarter or whatever.
Yeah.
And I feel like those type of things and those tactics, when I have used them with companies in the past, always seem to work well. If not to drive conversions, just to get a little bit of positive brand sentiment, which is, look, I don't think is ever bad.
Yeah, there was actually, so this is also to do with Perkbox, but I was managing, like I was a solo marketer in Australia. So I was managing the marketing calendar. And so I had, you know, all the public holidays, all the cultural holidays for all so Australia's very multicultural. So like I had all of them covered and all that kind of stuff. And I had them in advance, and then I would release campaigns for them, or I would release like today's blah, blah, blah day, use this perk with your team to like celebrate. And then I was like, you know what? I have this information in advance. I'm sure that these HR managers that we sell to would not want to like run to the shops to get something on the day that it's happening because they've forgotten. We should give them more of a heads up and send this information to them a week, 2 weeks in advance. And so what we ended up landing on was a monthly calendar that was released a month in advance, so that they would, if something happened on the first of the month, they'd have a month to prepare for it, right? And that, like, it essentially was my marketing calendar, just designed to be customer facing. And we'd have little ideas for like, this holiday's on this day. Here's ways that you can use Perkbox to celebrate, or use Perkbox to, you know, if there was a gap, really there's no clever. Holidays, there's nothing going on. Here's how you can like just do a little boost of motivation in the office with like a challenge or a poll or a reward system. And then that actually ended up being like hugely popular. It grew from being released like 1 month in advance to being like, they would get a whole year. At the start of the year, they'd get the whole 12 months calendar. Because they kept asking on customer success phone calls, they'd be like, when's the next calendar coming out? Like, I need to do my planning. And so we started releasing them further in advance. And I think eventually it became a lead magnet after I had left. They still do it, which is amazing. Like, it's my legacy. No one there probably knows that I did this, but so it's a lead magnet now. And then, yeah, it's just still going. It's been years since I left.
I love that though, because it's just a perfect example of marketing that makes the person you're marketing to's life easier. You know, it's just something really, really simple that people want. People, like, sometimes it isn't, they don't care about the ROI sometimes, you know, they don't, that's not what they care about all day, every day. Obviously there is points, but sometimes being there in a different mind frame or in a more casual way is beneficial as well. So love that. I have no surprise that was successful. It sounds great. Okay, so last question. We're probably going up to nearly 2 hours at this time. So at this stage,
That's
right?
fine.
So, but the conversation's been great. So, what you obviously have a very broad knowledge of marketing from your roles and from what you talk about in the newsletter. So, for people who are looking to learn more about marketing in general, or some of the areas that you've focused on or been gained speciality in, where would you send people?
I mean, Mehdeeka.substack.com is
Plug.
my number one. If you do subscribe and you get a newsletter, in the newsletter version, there is a link to a spreadsheet that I keep, which is all the resources I recommend. Lately, I have actually been looking into more like soft skills. So I've been reading books that are not actually aimed at marketers. One of them was about listening, and it was actually written by like a researcher, I think they started as an academic researcher and then they moved into tech and they did like UX research, but they were like structuring an interview, knowing when to shut up, and listening is a skill that many people don't have. And they talk about it in the context of work and listening at work if you're doing like an interview, like that's your job. But they also talk about it in the sense of being a good friend. Like if like when your friend comes to you and says, I've had a bad day, like actually listening to them and like knowing what questions to ask to show that you're listening, but also not doing it performatively and like actually being a good listener. And then really complementary to that, I'm reading a book at the moment, which is about interviewing. And it's by a guy who's like, he was a journalist. So he covered some like big investigative journalist stuff. I don't know his work personally. I just thought the book was cool, so I picked it up. And then he runs a like writers symposium where he interviews like famous writers and stuff on stage. Like that, like his job is interviewing people. But he talks about how like asking the right questions, structuring your interviews, and doing the prep work matters a lot. And he gives a lot of examples of interviews that are freely available, like on YouTube or whatever, from different people. And he goes over the different interviewing styles, where they've made mistakes and like how to course correct if you've made a mistake or you've gone off topic. It's really interesting. And again, it goes into like the work side of things, but also, you know, asking a friend, how are you? He's like, that's an interview question. And every time you ask a question, it's a potential to turn into an interview. But he also talks about how like sometimes that's bad. Like you don't want to be interviewing people when you're just asking questions. So that's really interesting. And I think as marketers, asking questions and listening to the answers is like basically the foundation of the job. So I have found it really helpful and really applicable. Unlike most business books where you're just like, this is great, big CEO. Thank you for your wisdom of be born 50 years ago.
Yeah, or just like a lot of things, or a lot of good stories, or a lot of good marketers, to put it in our context, have been made by luck or great product market fit or whatever, you know. And sometimes it isn't necessarily, you don't need to read someone's path that was impossible. It's going to be impossible for you. So I love both those answers. You can, what were the names of the books?
I'll give you the names.
Yeah, you can send me on.
So the listening one is called Listen Like You Mean It. And actually on her website, she has like a sample that you can download that has an activity in it to help you discover what time of day you're good at listening. And then the idea is you schedule your meetings for those hours, because everyone has a natural rhythm of like when your brain is receptive to listening and when your brain's not. So it's like, don't schedule. Yeah. So that was really cool. I actually did that exercise. And then the interviewing book's called Talk to Me.
Got it.
Very descriptive titles.
Yeah, but like the listening one is huge, and it's definitely something I kind of realized, and maybe was pushed to realize by different people that I worked with, that how important it was. The first was when I worked in sales, and I got what I thought was sales was being able to talk and convince people, and the psychological trigger of what everything else of being able to convince someone and confidently convince someone of the solution you have. What sales taught me very, very quickly was that actually the people who were the quietest, most analytical, and deepest active listeners, and the phrase of active listening is something I was unaware of beforehand, were the best ones. Completely flipped it on my head of what the whole thing was, and it got me interested in. So I'm definitely going to give that a read and double down. Hopefully, I've been a good listener today and the previous.
Been a great listener and a good interviewer.
Great. Okay, that sounds good. I'll take that. Cool, Kayla. Thanks a million. There was 2 really good conversations. Loved having you on, and I'll link everything below to Medica. Final recommendation for anyone who isn't following to follow. I've learned a lot from it. I'm sure you will.
Oh, thank you.
Kayla, thanks a lot.
My pleasure.